What we should do is probably
If we do want to start, are you guys ready?
yeah, why not? Let's just start.
Tell him that he's gonna be, well, we're gonna play the intro and.
Hey, at the end, did you
Chris,
see
we're
that
gonna
little
play the
video I
intro,
sent you
and
on the
we'll give you the
police state
thumbs
stuff?
up when we're ready.
What?
At the end, you see that little police state thing I sent on Slack?
Just a few minutes ago?
Yeah, don't worry. But if we get it at the very end, just because for our next week's show.
Yeah, we'll get that. I'll get it by the end of the show.
Is this a little crooked? The
what?
camera?
Probably. Why is that live like that?
Are we live?
Oh, somehow we are.
All right. We're live.
My people of this country and we're under attack. They banning us, they cancel us for speaking the facts. If you man enough, come stand with us, take USA back. And every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is American flags. American flags. American flags.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Behind Enemy Lines, the bunker in the communist state of Illinois. And we have a very special guest today that's going to be extremely relevant to all the folks that are on the right that are fighting for our state, for our children, for parents. We have Christopher Adamo. He wrote Rules for Defeating Radicals. And this book is something that we need to live by. We got to get him up to Illinois, and we got to have an event with him because we have to apply these tactics because they're winning in Illinois. We're at the epicenter of Saul Alinsky. We're at the heart of what these radical leftists and Marxists are using to attack us. I think most of you that are listening to this are very familiar with their tactics. They're calling us names, Proud Boys, racist, homophobe, misogynist, all these crazy things. They use it to try to discredit us. In reality, it's a bunch of lies. So I'm very excited to have Chris. He's going to give us some good pointers. I hope for those of you that are listening, you're going to take advantage of some of these things. And also, we have to have the courage to fight back. So you're going to learn about that as well. Paul, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think the other thing that we've come to realize is how the Alinsky strategy, the leftist push, has affected the right side of the political spectrum. And what we've realized in Illinois is that's become a uniparty. Is like that leftist influence just pushes everything further and further and further left. I think people get caught up in this, polarization of the right is about this, left is about this, and they don't focus on the problem of the left having control of all the institutions. So I think Chris is going to be able to shed some light on, how we can combat some of these things and more importantly, call out the people who are supposed to be opposing these things and hold them accountable.
Yeah, so Jason, can we give a big round of applause with that little soundboard you got there? Sorry, I caught him off guard. Trying to play with our soundboard.
So welcome, Chris.
Oh, thank you.
Can we get him up on the screen?
Well, thank you for the applause there, Terry. Yeah, it's good to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity, and just to let you guys know, the things that you're describing, as you said, you're at the epicenter in so many ways, Illinois, and what you're seeing, the tactics And I'll only, and this sounds like I'm quibbling, you say the difference between right and left. It's entirely on the left. There's a chasm between left and right. Now, having said that, if you say Republican and Democrat, unfortunately, in too many cases, there is no real difference between the two,
Right.
other than one of them was
Right,
honest
right.
enough
We
to
know
admit
that.
they're a
We know
leftist.
that, yeah.
And I came from Wyoming. We lived there 32 years, and I'll tell you
Wow.
what, we're going to talk at length about rhinos here in a little bit. We hopefully, and Wyoming with 80%.
Oh, the Cheneys, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the Liz Cheney state, 80% of the voters in Wyoming are registered Republicans. Okay. Having said that, the biggest battle that we faced as conservatives, getting any kind of a conservative agenda implemented, the biggest battle that we faced was against the Republicans. Because
Right.
you go in there, and at the state convention, you try to put up a pro-life platform for the Republican plank. The thing that's been in the national platform since the 1970s, you get laughed out of the room by all these Republicans.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the point being that if they call themselves Republican in Wyoming, if they stay away from the state income tax and the Second Amendment, they can pretty much govern like a bunch of Vermont
Yeah.
Democrats, and most people don't notice. And so that's what they've counted on. Now that's changing, and I can tell you all about that. But again, what we see is a difference between a stark difference between left and right, and many of your Republicans are on the left.
So
Right.
you have buffaloes and rhinos in Wyoming, right?
Oh yeah, and unfortunately, I think the rhinos outnumber the buffaloes. But yeah.
So, Chris, why don't you give us a little bit about your background and kind of dovetail that into why you wrote this book?
Well, okay, I got involved in the political arena again back in Wyoming, very low population state, and that being the case, politics are very different there because you don't have that many people, and I was not very high ranking within the whole operation, and yet I'm on a first name basis right now. Excuse the motorcycle out the window, by the way. I'm on a first name basis with both of the current senators in Wyoming. And that's not because I'm some famous person, and I guarantee you they don't like me right now. We'll talk about that. But it's just the fact that in Wyoming, you end up very close to the political process without even trying. And it was there that I started realizing that we're losing battles that we should be winning.
Mm-hmm.
And I could go across the board. And on the national scale, you're watching us as conservatives, as Christians, as patriots. We're losing battles that we should be winning. Why? Because we don't fight them properly.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, the majority of the population agrees with us. If it was any kind of democratic element to the process, we should be walking away with all of this. But what they do is they use the Alinsky strategy, and we'll go into more detail here, but it's a bunch of dirty, underhanded tricks. They use that to hamstring us.
Mm-hmm.
And there's two overriding premises to my book. One of them, the first one, and if we don't get this one right, the rest is all moot. The first one is the Alinsky strategy only works on those who allow it.
Right.
If the minute you reject it, so I call Terry an Antifa anarchist, and the minute he starts stepping on eggshells to try and prove that he's not as bad as I say he is, I'm the one in control of the whole conversation. Okay, so the Alinsky strategy, they attack you, they mock you, and they try to intimidate you. And if you respond to those things, they're in control. You're responding to them. You're submissive to them. Okay.
So, Chris, wait, one thing
yeah.
you said, Antifa anarchist, right? So what would you think if a Republican chairman of a township called his own Republican committeeman anarchists simply because they wanted to censure our leaders who gave to Democrats? Isn't that kind of crazy? Our Republican chairman,
it's typical rhino. Unfortunately, it's a lot more.
Rhino.
Yeah, it's a lot more prevalent than just crazy. And I'll point you to Liz Cheney attacking Donald Trump and saying she was standing for the Constitution because she's standing with Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff. Okay, and it's this kind of thing. Yeah, again, as I wrote the book, I'll tell you, I got about 2/3 of the way through it. And I went, you know what? I have to add a chapter here, because I'm giving the impression as I'm writing this that the battle is between Republicans and Democrats. And as we were just discussing a minute ago, no, it's between left and right. And so many of the Republican Party, unfortunately, I think it may be close to a majority of the political players, not the grassroots, but the political players. So many of them, they're in cahoots with the left.
Yes.
And so that they put the R by their name, they might as well be Democrats.
Chris, before we jump into that, let's just back up a second for anybody not familiar with the Alinsky strategy. I know Saul Alinsky was a major political activist back in the 1960s, kind of grassroots in his own right. And
Community organizer.
Right. Hillary, yeah, that's where that first came from, right?
Yep.
And then we saw Barack Obama kind of adopt that as his moniker before he came into politics. Can you just describe that very briefly for the people that don't know? And, Hillary Clinton wrote her thesis on Saul Alinsky's book, The Rules for Radicals. It's kind of a leftist Bible, correct?
Let's just take the title of his book for starters, okay? Rules for Radicals. Okay, now, if you read the book, you get the impression that this is how a bunch of good people can make society utopian for everybody else. I mean, the final couple of paragraphs of the book, of his book, I mean, you need a little insulin for it. It's so syrupy because they have this beautiful future for everybody.
Yeah.
It's not rules for the majority.
Right.
It's rules for this fringe. How can this fringe magnify their effect on society to implement a radical agenda that is not radical in the case of making America great? It's Marxism.
Right, Marxism.
It's all the evils of the Gulag and communism, and this is how we can get we can overwhelm this majority of the population through dirty tricks, through lies, through all kinds of manipulations, and have our way with them. And by the time they realize what's happening, they've lost all power to resist us.
Yeah, one of the things that I noted about your book, one of the themes that kind of came across in this sort of Marxist strategy that's specific to Alinsky's implementation of it was that, the fundamental strategy is by any means necessary. So, in other words, like, doesn't matter if it's immoral, doesn't matter if it's illegal. It's almost,
Right.
as long as you can sell it.
Let me add two premises to this book. Okay, that I gave you the first one. The second one is, and it's going right along with what you're saying there. And this one sounds inflammatory to them, but leftists never care about any cause they claim to champion. And I'll underline any, and I'll challenge them to try and prove me wrong. They never care about any cause they claim to champion. I can always show you where they'll backtrack on it in the very next breath. It's all a matter of using the situation, whatever the situation may be, to use it to advance their agenda, which is amassing power and gaining control.
i.e. African Americans, and they're experiencing it right now throughout the country. I'm working with a lot of different African American organizations, and they're pumping all these illegals into their backyards, into their field houses, into their schools, into their police stations, and they're turning their back, and they're taking all this money from the Biden administration, and it's affecting and impacting them more so than any of us. I mean, they're starting to come out in our area, but they're very offended. They're
pick a topic that the left claims to champion, and you can do that with. I don't care.
Oh yeah,
what
women's
it is.
rights.
Women's rights.
Oh wait. What is a woman? Oh, you could go in a bathroom. You can play boys. Right.
Perfect example. Women's rights are all for it if it means one thing. It means they get these women to be obsessed with killing their unborn children. Why? Because the real goal is to destroy the family, because the family passes on from one generation to the next. Intact families pass on morals and traditions, and that is a total interference to the Marxist agenda. And so, you get these women obsessed with the idea that to be a free woman, I got to want to kill my babies in the abortion clinics and whatever. And so they're pro-woman. They're all for liberating women and elevating women and stuff. And the minute some sicko, 6'5" male wants to come into the locker room with your daughter, all of a sudden, your daughter, her womanhood and her vulnerability, they don't care. Again, every other issue, you'll find this exact same pattern.
Well, it seems like they use the vulnerable, they use the downtrodden communities as their political weapon
Empty
against
promises to
anybody
them.
else,
Yep.
right? Promises, and I was no fan of George W. Bush. I think he's one of the worst presidents of all time. But he coined this term, the soft bigotry of low expectations.
Yeah.
And I feel like they nail that.
Yeah.
And they, which is it's terrible.
It's bigotry.
Essentially, it is bigotry, right? Because they're saying like with the voting thing, for the longest time, the message was, well, African Americans or minorities, they can't get an ID. Like what? Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine anything more racist.
Tell
than
the average
suggesting
black
that.
citizen you're too stupid and too inept and too helpless as a human being to
And
do.
the left tells the African Americans that. The left says that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
exactly.
you see some of these clips on YouTube where people go around and in communities like Harlem and ask people if they know where to get an ID, and it's like they're insulted by the actual question.
Yeah, but look at how whenever they do this, again, endemic to the Alinsky strategy is you always do what you do from a place of moral superiority, from your moral high ground.
Right.
You're the one that is compassionate. You're the one that's helping out. And you mentioned George W. Bush, another one of his statements he was famous for, and this is where he walked right into it, was compassionate conservatism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because he was he's a conservative. He's heartless. Okay. So what does he do? He's going to be a compassionate conservative. Well, that's not like people like Terry there. He's going to be a conservative that really cares about people. And what did he do with that? He validated their phony moral high ground.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think, what you're essentially describing is Marxism. And that's like, I think there's this dichotomy in society where it's like the left can push back against somebody like Donald Trump or someone else, or anybody on the political right and suggest that they're leaning more toward the fascist, dictator. And then Hitler's this bogeyman that they can always try to prop up and describe that person as. But then there's no equivalent on the left. We can't say that this person is Stalin or this person is Mao.
The only reason we can't say that is because we haven't.
Yes.
Well, no, actually, it's because of us. We haven't said that.
Well,
now, let me give you one example here. You hear the political spectrum, and you hear that, well, you have the Marxists are on the left and the Nazis are on the right.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And you hear that, and that's been presented so universally that most of the people on our side accepted it and buy that. Now, that is garbage. What you have is on the right, you have people who believe in individual liberty, individual responsibility, and accountability and opportunity. On the left, you have your totalitarian despots, okay? The Nazis are right over, the fascists are right over there with Marx. As a matter of fact, they were going to, at the beginning of World War II, and when the Nazis were in full swing, they were actually allying with Stalin until they began vying for power. People say, well,
treaty, right?
the Nazis and the Marxists, well, they hate each other. Well, you know what? That's like saying the Sunnis and Shiites are on opposite ends of the religious spectrum because they hate each other. No, they're all Islamists vying for power. And in the same sense, the Nazis and the Marxists and the fascists, they're all the same thing. They're all these morally bankrupt, depraved despots looking for power by destroying a culture, destroying a society. Right. And they're on the opposite end of the spectrum from the Christian conservatives who want families to be intact, who want freedom maximized, and
individual sovereignty.
Individual sovereignty and opportunity.
I'd like to hear your thoughts on the anti-fascist, Antifa, the anti-fascist, right? That's what they claim to be. Anti-fascist, so please give. I have my opinions on them, but
again, you guys are great. That's a great example of how leftists they never care about any cause they claim to champion, and they claw their way onto this phony moral high ground. Okay, now let's talk about the fascists and the brown shirts, the Nazis and the fascists. Back historically, what did they do? They would run around marauding, burning. They would attack businesses and people. They would use all kinds of brutalization and intimidation tactics to advance their agenda of despotism. Okay. What are the Antifa crowd doing? They're doing exactly that for the same exact goal. Right. But as leftists get onto their phony moral high ground all the time, they're anti-fascists. How are they anti-fascists? Are they pushing individual liberty? Are they pushing, family values? Ha ha. Are they doing any of this? No, they're the epitome of the brown shirts. This is exactly what they are. And but they do it from this perspective of they're anti-fascist, and our side says, well, I'm anti-fascist too, so let's all try and get along. And at that point, they've dominated not only the physical activity in the streets, but they're not being confronted as they should as brown shirts, as potentially implementing something in this country that would be just as much of a nightmare as anything you saw from Hitler, Stalin, down in Venezuela, or any place else.
Yeah, I call them pasty white pencil neck basement dwellers. That's what Antifa is.
Well, the funny thing is they call themselves anti-fascist, and I feel like,
And they're the epitome of fascists.
They show up. Sorry, they showed up like, I'm a member of the Joint Civic Committee of Italian Americans, and they said they're going to come beat up the racist Parmesan eating Italians who want our Columbus statue back. They show up there at school board meetings. They threaten us. They'll go and approach the police officers. That's not bigoted at all, huh? They go up to the cops and say, hey, do you got your body camera on? You know why? That body camera's keeping them from getting their butts whipped by the cops or guys like me.
Yeah. You're not even a Parmesan guy. You're a Mono guy, right?
Yeah. I could fart and knock 5 of them over.
So, Chris, one of the things that, you touched on there with the anti-fascist stuff is the language and how they can try to control language. And I think that's a big tenet of Marxism is to try.
It's a huge element. It's the single biggest element of how they operate. Yeah, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
Go
that's
ahead.
okay. One of the things I noticed that you mentioned in your book was the use of democratic. Like they're the Democratic Party, and they're trying to kind of co-opt that term as opposed to Democrat Party. And the idea that we are a democratically elected republic, a representative government,
a representative republic.
You want to kind of expound on that idea of where they go, not just with that term, but in other areas, and how they kind of try to control the language.
Well, I'll give you one example, and again, here's where we have the opportunity to come against it, and we don't. You hear the term left-leaning. You guys have heard that, right? Like very grudgingly, they'll say you have somebody, like Jerry Nadler. Well, he's left-leaning, right? So he's left-leaning. Okay. So what do we have as opposed to that? We don't. Do you ever hear them say right-leaning? No, it's extreme right. Okay, so they're left-leaning and we're extreme right. So what we want to do is we want to show that we're not, we're just on our side, just like they are. So we move over to here, right? Okay, now try this. Left-leaning Jerry Nadler, he's all the way over here. He's in the gutter with he's a Marxist. Okay,
there's no such thing as Antifa from Nadler.
We lean just a little bit to the left of him. Where are we at? Look how far left we're facing.
Right.
Okay, and this is the games that they play. That in every one of these situations, we could stand against it. Now, he's not a left-leaning person. He's a left-wing extremist. He's hard left. He's advocating a Marxist ideology and agenda. Okay, there's nothing left-leaning about it. It's severe. Okay, no, we don't want to do that because then we're being rancorous. There's too much discord. Can't we all come together, etc. And they suck us into those games. And when we do that, and we start operating according to the terms they dictate, it's like we're playing this defensive game to try and prove that we're not as bad as they say we are, and all we end up doing is helping them implement their agenda at that point instead of saying it's a bad agenda.
Did you ever hear of Yuri Bezmenov? He did this interview. It's all over YouTube, and he was a former KGB guy, and he basically, he basically said that communism or Marxism is an infiltrating ideology. It was like Khrushchev said, like we're gonna invade America, and we're not going to fire one shot because we're going to invade it ideologically through its
insidiously,
institutions. Right. And one of the things that I have trouble with when I talk to some of my left-wing friends is, like, one of them said to me one time, like, the Republicans are destroying the country not too long ago, because I think probably because of the Trump thing and whatever, which I thought was absurd because I think both parties are pretty much corrupt. But I wanted to get your take because the left seems to control all the institutions, whether it be government, media, education, the corporate infrastructure.
military,
Right,
DOJ.
right,
The military
yeah,
now, yeah.
And so
that's probably one of the most dangerous, yeah.
And so the thing is, like, I hate having the conversation of even arguing the right and left thing because, or like, being labeled a Republican or whatever the case may be, because I think we should focus more on how, look, when you get one party or you get one ideology that is controlling this much of society, it is dangerous to everybody. So I wanted to get your perspective on maybe, trying to
Okay, I'm
shift
going to go
away.
back to the fact that the dangerous ideology is the leftist ideology.
Right.
Yeah.
The right, the real right, is life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, family values, Judeo-Christian principles on which the nation was founded. Now, because theirs is evil, this is another one of their tricks that they pull, is these moral equivalencies. You have your agenda, I have my agenda, and so they're actually equal. I'll give you to me one of the worst examples, and it's gotten this bad because our side let it get this way, is justices on the high courts. Okay, the truth is the only justices of any party that should be actually declared fit for those high courts are those that now would all be considered extreme right. Why?
Yeah.
Because they want to uphold the Constitution.
Yep.
Okay,
Should be a referee,
so it's like,
not a politically partisan.
right. And so, well, if you have somebody that upholds the Constitution, that makes him a hard right winger. And so we have to balance those with people that hate the Constitution. And our side lets them get away with that. We should make every single judicial nomination a battle over, are you going to uphold the Constitution or destroy it? Well, let's look at your track record. You know what? You, Mr. Democrat nominee, have a track record of attacking constitutional principle. You are, not only am I not going to vote for you, but I'm going to declare you unfit for the judiciary because of that. You do that at that point, they're at least going to have to start trying to prove that they have some sort of interest in the Constitution. That's our country. We have very legitimate grounds to stand for our country on the basis of, what's the oath that you take? You stand there and you raise your right hand and you take the oath. It's to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution.
So
sorry, you can't take that oath.
So you're talking
unfit.
about this idea of the living Constitution, which is ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And this is where I think that we need to have civics back in our education system because
it's exactly why they took it out, by the way.
If you want to reinterpret the Constitution, hey, fine. But what you need to do is do it properly through how our government's supposed to work, which is the legislative branch makes a law or amends the Constitution. We don't need judges creating legislation by reinterpreting the Constitution. But
right,
I mean,
and again, their goal is to get their way by whatever means. If the judge does it, if it's an activist leftist judge, then great, he can eradicate the Constitution. He can. As a matter of fact, there were judges in the last 10 years that I've heard that were referencing European laws as their basis for why we need to stand a certain way on a certain issue coming across the court, and all of these things. Those people are unfit for office. And frankly, in a sane society, you make a comment like that, and you just, if you tried doing that in a business, in a contract, with another business, they'd be suing you.
Yeah.
Because you're in breach of contract. Well, these people, you remember the contract with America. I've always said the Constitution was the original foundational contract with America, and they're in breach of contract.
Yeah. I'd like your opinion on this other weapon of the left, Southern Poverty and Law Center, right? And it's personally affected. Well, it actually, the guy that wrote it, I'm not going to say his name. He's a punk, but he's an Antifa associate, and absolutely Antifa associate, right? And he was sicked on me by the Downers Grove liberals, and it kind of launched me into the national media. So I want to thank him for that. But he wrote a 5-page hit piece on me and kind of stretched it. It's kind of funny. He also put president of parents involved in education for Illinois, and he put us, Moms for America, Moms for Liberty, No Left Turn. They labeled us like, so now everyone thinks we're tied in with Nazis, right? So they hear SPLC, they think of white supremacist, racist Nazis. But I'd like your opinion on how effectively the left uses, i.e. Southern Poverty and Law Center, who does not have Black Lives Matter or Antifa as a hate group.
And that's an excellent example.
So go ahead and tell.
Well,
tell
just look at their name, Southern Poverty Law Center. This is for the poor, downtrodden, little kid that's out there, this little minority that's been just trying to scrape by, getting a little bit to eat, and they're living in the little stick house and all of that. And so, yeah, does any of us want to see that kid suffer? No. Maybe we better step lightly around this, because we want to uplift everybody. No, these people, this SPLC, just like every leftist group, they do not care about the downtrodden. They do not care about those that need uplifted. They care about using their plight as an emotional tug to do what their real agenda is, which is to gain power. Okay, let me give you I'm changing subject real quick, but you'll understand the parallels here. So a couple of days ago, we heard at every news outlet coast to coast was screaming. It was so awful that the Israelis did this airstrike on this hospital. Okay, Rashida Tlaib, who's a big Islamist, she's out there. This is the end of the world, that the Israelis are so horrible. Now, she didn't talk about what happened when Hamas moved into Gaza in the first place. She wouldn't talk about that, but this is bad. This really this needs to be done. Israel needs to be wiped off the face of the earth because they're so evil because of this. Then it comes out, then it comes out that this was one of those Hamas missiles that they're trying to inflict all this kind of exact same damage on innocent Israelis, and it went awry and hit their own people. Or, be honest with you, knowing how Hamas and Islamists operate, they may have shot it there on purpose so they could blame Israel. Suddenly, she doesn't have a problem with it. There's nothing wrong with Hamas, firing these missiles. She's still attacking Israel on this basis. This is what these people do. Right. They're going to use the downtrodden, and if the downtrodden end up worse off because of it, they don't care. What's happened in every city where Black Lives Matter has really gone wild? What's happened to the black on black crime, to the black businesses and everything? What's happened to all of them? They've been devastated by it. But what's happened to the people running BLM? They're all multimillionaires, and all of a sudden they have all kinds of power, and you have all kinds of white pandering organizations like Jeff Bezos and Amazon saying, we support Black Lives Matter. Yeah. See how good we are? See what open-minded white people we are, because we support these good black people who are just trying to say that their lives matter. It's everything that they do. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Well, I challenge people over and over again. Show me any cause that the leftists actually care about. I'll show you in the next breath where they contradict themselves, and they'll backstab that cause if they can get power to do that.
Well, that was mentioning the Gaza thing. That's a good segue for us to talk about what kind of influence the media has on all of this, because I think a lot of that happened. A lot of that Gaza hospital thing caught fire, no pun intended, on Twitter, and then people ran with it, and you see this type of thing happen on social media all the time. And I don't know if you've ever seen this clip where there's they put a bunch of local news stations together in this clip, and it was the anchors that were talking about how people are have their own opinion on social media and everything, and one of the clips is like 30 different local news stations with the anchor saying, and this is dangerous to our democracy. Yeah. I don't know if you saw that clip ever. It's fascinating. But one of the things you mentioned in your book is how they insist on, using the, this is dangerous to our democracy. And they did the word democracy and things like that. And I don't mean to go back to the language thing, but can you kind of you touched on in your book, but I wanted to see if you touch on, when they weaponize these types of words, like democracy. Yes, we are democratically elected, but they always kind of put that out into the zeitgeist that we're a democracy. Right. Can you touch on why 51% rule can become mob rule, and why that is actually dangerous to the form of government that we have?
Well, the simplest example I was ever given is that democracy is when you have 6 wolves and 4 sheep voting on what to have for dinner. The founders were absolutely opposed to democracy for that reason. Yeah. 51% of the populace could legally destroy the other 49%, and it's a democracy. If the majority supports it, and what they had was they recognized a tendency of humanity to where people in power start manipulating the power to their own benefit at the expense of others.
Right.
And so, no, if you can get 51% on any given day to agree to something that trashes the other 49%, then it's over. We vote on it and it's done. So no, it's dangerous that way. Having said that, what you have in the current situation and what they are shooting for, what the leftists are actually shooting for, is enough of the population to be ignorant of the actual consequences,
Right.
to where they can amass uncontested power. Now, I can point to North Korea. You can point to the Soviet Union for most of the 20th century, and Venezuela and places like this, where, where all of a sudden the government has this monopoly of power. And you think that 80% of the people of the Soviet Union wanted to live in oppression and squalor and fear of the KGB 24/7? No, but what are they going to do about it at that point? That's going back to Alinsky and Rules for Radicals. How do you get it to that point without people realizing it, that it's happening, and with people playing along with it or falling into the snares until now it can't be turned back?
Do you guys remember when Obama was president and he would always say, "We are better than this"? When it was
the apology tour.
I used to
the
hate
apology
that,
tour.
man.
Yeah.
When he went around the world and he apologized for how bad America is.
Yeah.
See, and that's a great example of that phony moral high ground.
Right.
One of the other things Obama said along those exact same lines is, well, he'd start these conversations. Everybody knows, okay, and then he'd announce something
That's
idiotic.
the language game. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and yeah, he was another Alinsky minion, by the way.
Right.
I mean,
right. Well,
no surprise there.
He described himself as starting on politics as being community organizer.
A community organizer, and if you remember, I discussed the term
underground.
community organizer is what they actually are, as a mob agitator. And no, that doesn't sound. See, community organizer sounds like I'm the guy that's going to go out there and get bike trails put in or something.
Well, I just remember I remember during the George Floyd, situation in America where, everybody's calling Donald Trump a fascist, and we don't have to talk about Trump at all. But I do remember there's this clip, again, that you can find on YouTube or Twitter or whatever, of a bunch of leftist politicians during that time who are basically Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley. They're basically fomenting the rioters by suggesting that they rise up, that they go find them out in Washington, D.C. when they're eating or they're pumping their gas and harass them. And it's like,
let's start with what did Donald Trump have to do with George Floyd? And yet it was what it was the left saw an excuse to exploit a situation in order to gain politically. What happened? Now, George Floyd died, right? We all saw him die. Okay, so what happened in all these black communities after George Floyd died? Well, because of all the leftist activity, a bunch more blacks died.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But that was okay because that was black on black crime, so that was okay. Yeah. And so do they really care about these people?
Communities? Who makes those communities the way that they are? I mean,
well, unfortunately, it's that we can go back a long ways, because
that's
it's
a long
ultimately
conversation. But I'm just saying, like,
it's a spiritual problem, and it goes back to the fact I would take specifically with the modern black communities. I would take them back to Lyndon Johnson with the Great Society, where what we've got to do is destroy the families, because I tell you what, you listen to Thomas Sowell describing Harlem, where he grew up. And what it was like back when he grew up, I mean, long time ago, and it was safe. And the kids in the black schools, imagine this, they scored just as well as those white privileged kids, okay? Because they were made to go to school and do their work and obey the teacher. And if you didn't, and you come home, you're getting your hide tanned by dad. Mm-hmm. And the family operated this way. So they functioned. Now, were there discriminatory laws on the books that need to change? Of course, but that wasn't what the left was about. The left was about destroying the things that were working, because what they need is a dependent class that's standing there with their hand out saying, if I jump through the hoops for you, will you give me whatever subsistence that I need?
That's exactly, as you're talking about, they need a dependent society. During COVID with small businesses, right? The big businesses were getting money. Small businesses were getting destroyed.
Right.
They want to take out those small businesses.
Yep.
And it's just another aspect of what you're talking about. Is they want people to be dependent on them.
Yep.
Yeah,
Every step of the way.
So I wrote this down because this is what I got from your book. I mean, I saw, okay, leftism equals soft bigotry of low expectations equals government paternalism, rinse, repeat, and then you get globalism, right? And and then you create this vast welfare state. But just to go back to Thomas Sowell real quick, we should mention him again because everybody should go read Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell, an African-American economist, probably the most brilliant economist of the 20th century. I know there's others, people might say, Milton Friedman or Frederick Hayek, but Thomas Sowell, who is still alive, I think he's 90 plus years old, he has written amazing books just breaking down how corrupt the establishment is and the leftist agenda is. And one of the things...
And how harmful specifically to blacks that it is.
That's right.
I think I used to watch him on Sundays. Soul Train.
I think he's probably...
Okay, I'm not going to touch that one.
He'd probably slap you. But one of the things he mentioned, to your point, Chris, was like the marriage rate for the African American community before the Great Society was something like 70%, and then each year and decade following, it just kept plummeting, and of course the society kind of bifurcated to that point. But one of the questions, I want to go back to the media thing. I want to ask you how culpable you think the media is in all of this. Because
100%.
Right,
it's like the Democrats are 100%. The media is 100%. I'll tell you one group that I would really like to point out, and they call themselves the churches. And I'm going to tell you, they're not all churches because they're not all Christian. Okay, it's just that simple. But when you have churches preaching things that are totally contrary to anything Jesus said, anything the apostles said, we could go down the list there. They're not churches. They're community organizer conclaves or hornets' nests. And they're culpable for not speaking the truth of right and wrong, how to run a family, how to behave as a citizen in the community. So yeah, there's a lot of these organizations, and the left, again, infiltrates all of them for the purpose of destroying them and making them dysfunctional for their actual real reason to exist. But in the process, you create a bunch of chaos and discord, a bunch of people who are socially and economically dysfunctional, and that's what Marxism thrives off of.
Yeah, I have two comments on that. I was raised a Catholic, not a very
Terry's
good.
got some experience.
I was not a very good Catholic. I started getting closer to my faith because a lot of the supporters, when I go out and confront these guys, are older grandpa Catholic guys, and they're probably watching some of you guys here. And I would meet them when they do the rosary on Thursdays, when I have time. And I told them I was like a little disappointed in the Catholic Church because they're not getting involved. Actually, many churches doesn't matter. They don't get involved.
Yeah,
they don't want to say anything. And I would tell them, I said, what happened? I go, Jesus, we used to behead Muslims back with the Crusaders back in the day. I can't even get them to stick up for their own. I can't get people to stick up for their own children. Now we have Catholic Charities being bribed by the Biden administration, taking these illegals and pumping them all over our country, everywhere.
Right.
And they're getting rewarded financially. And I don't understand it. And then the other thing is where Paul and I, in our neighborhood, we have a Methodist church. And they had Drag Santa and Dr. Claus for children.
Yeah, and I would say that's actually a contradiction in terms to call that a Methodist church when they do stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, it was disgusting. So I'm sorry. I just wanted to share.
Yeah, no, I get you, but yeah, we're on the same page there. Again, if what they can do is destroy those principles of basic right and wrong, of the Judeo-Christian principles on which America was founded and by which America flourished. You look at what we did in 2 centuries, and very few countries that were that young could possibly come to dominance on the world stage that quickly and that thoroughly. And it's because of those principles that we understood. We understood that the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We understood the trial by real jury, and that the rule of law was supposed to apply equally. We understood those things, and we operated under them. And that was because those were, puritanical ideas. Those were Christian ideas that were brought over and incorporated into, the Mayflower Compact and the early state constitutions, and then eventually our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. And the separation of church and state thing that you hear is well, again, another one of those leftist things where they took a statement and they totally reversed its actual meaning. It was to protect the churches from the Congress. You read the first 5 words of the First Amendment, the first 5 words, and they'll tell you who the First Amendment is restricting. Congress shall make no law. Who are they restricting? The Congress, not the churches, not the people that want to put up a nativity scene. But again, the leftists, they take every one of these things and they turn them on their ear, and then they say, you're a religious bigot or you're a zealot or something. And you know what? I have got to prove to you that I'm not. So I've got to find out how to jump through hoops to please you that the accusation that you make against me is not valid. And at that point, we start playing the game by their rules. And at that point, we're on the defensive, and a defensive war is one you're always going to lose. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take for that to happen.
They're trying to make being a Christian or a Catholic a bad word now. You know, I mean, they're attacking.
Well,
and look at your Methodists. Look at their response.
Yeah,
that's what they do.
Well, I'm going to show you what a good Christian I am. I'm going to fly a gay flag, which is antithetical to anything in that Bible that Methodist is supposed to believe in. Okay, so the Bible gets thrown out, but the left approves of me now.
Well, that's a good. On that point, there's a good. In your book, you talk about some of the Alinsky strategies or some of the specific things that they hone in on to try to get control of the political atmosphere. And I think we should kind of hit on some of those again, because I don't want us to get into this this partisan people thinking that we're being a little partisan. This is about the ideology in my mind. And one of the things you talk about, I think that is a specific weapon that they use, is this idea of tolerance. Can you kind of expound on how they use tolerance because it's that compassion.
I'm going to make Paul mad at me here. I'm going to make you mad at me, because here's how they use tolerance. Okay. And just think about this a bit. Okay. If you're tolerant, you're not going to be partisan. Okay. So they accuse you of partisanship, and suddenly it's like you're backing off. You want to show you're tolerant. Okay. Now, tolerance is how evil proliferates. It's not that the evil gains power. It's that the people standing against it and the firewalls against it are being removed. Okay. And so what they do is they preach tolerance at you and me. And, whether it's in the political realm because you're intolerant because you're just a hard right winger, or whether it's you're a religious bigot or any of these other things. They throw these Alinsky labels at you.
So the idea is to get you to compromise your principles, because...
To get you to go on defensive because you're afraid of standing for your principles. And in the process, you compromise them and eventually abandon them. And at that point, you're just trying to get the approval of people that actually hate you and everything about you.
Right. And I didn't want you to think that I was, I'm worried about, being partisan. I guess...
No, I get that.
What I'm saying is that, if I look at the current landscape, it's just the in the zeitgeist, there's this idea of right versus left. When I look at the problem, I think it's ideological when people...
Yeah, it absolutely is. But leftism is an ideology in every sense.
Absolutely. But can you I think we would agree the Democratic Party of John F. Kennedy is not what the Democratic Party is today. In that the Democratic Party has become overcome by leftist or Marxist ideological persuasion.
Absolutely right.
Okay.
And they're every bit as zealous and religious as your Islamists, which is why, again, since the October 8th incident there in Israel, you've been seeing so much common ground where the leftists are out supporting Hamas and all that. These are the people that, that say they support freedom and individual rights, and they're anti-fascist and all that. And who are they supporting? Islamic terrorism. So it is absolutely an ideology. It's absolutely advanced by the same tactics, which are intimidation and lies. That's we go down Alinsky's rules for radicals, and Terry had asked me at one point, which one do you think is the most effective? Well, I would say ridicule. We're going to call you names. Yeah. Whether it's partisan or bigot or homophobe go down the list, we're going to call you names. I actually ended up putting in a chapter there on labels, the
Yes,
labels that they
right.
attach to you, because we start out the conversation with these labels, and then your goal is to try and
Defend
present
yourself.
your case, you hard right-wing extremist,
Right.
without falling into one of these labels. And if you accept the labels and you try really hard not to step on things that will validate those labels, you're playing their game and you're hamstrung. Instead of saying, to heck with your labels, because no matter what you try
Yes.
to throw at me as your morality, you stand for something 1,000 times worse.
Then
And
now
so I'm
that
not
could-
going to accept your labels.
Right.
I'm not going to go there. I'm going to stand on what is right and wrong, what's been traditionally right and wrong, and still is. And that's how I'm going to present my case.
So I want to use an example right here, and then it's a shout out for Stagg High School. And I think I talked to you before we started the show, right? There's going to be a rally. There's going to be a rally on Monday for parents. It's a Protect All Kids rally. So in Illinois, and I think they have it in many other states, they're allowed to have boys and girls sports, boys go into the locker rooms. So there's a big Muslim population there as well. So like half of the parents, a big portion of them are Muslim, and they're standing out and they're getting together on Monday. So this rally is going to be held on October 23rd at 8015 West 111th Street, right? So at what time? 1 p.m. All right, 1 p.m. October 23rd, 8015 West 111th Street. But what's important about this rally is some of the parents today spoke with the administration, right? And they're trying to scare off these parents from showing up. So now the left is doing the same thing they did to us in our school district. And they're saying, they're telling the parents that Proud Boys are showing up. The Proud Boys are showing up. Now they're worried about the safety of the children. Oh, they're also worried about the safety of the children because a lot of the parents are Muslim. They don't care about that. The kids are not going to be safe. The Proud Boys aren't showing up. Just like they said the Proud Boys were going to take over our meeting in Downers Grove. Didn't happen. You know what was in our meeting? Some Antifa associates. What'd they do? Who got threatened? All the parents that spoke up. Nobody got threatened. So they're doing the same playbook at a different school in the Southwest Side, trying to discredit parents who are going to defend their children, trying to distract the fact that they got porn in the schools, they got drag queens, they got boys wanting to go in the girls' bathrooms and sports. And it's it's everything that your book's about. So
Destroy, Chris, to your point, just, trying to put a wedge in between the family.
Right. Now let's just talk just for a second, about the Proud Boys. They have got us to the point where it's like if somebody's second cousin ever met a Proud Boy in Cincinnati 2 years ago, well, that proves he's a bigot and so are you.
Right.
And we tap dance away from it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I don't know of anything that the Proud Boys have done that warrants this kind of castigation. Now, I don't know all about it, but the point being, I do know that Antifa is busy doing this every day of the week, and we can show examples all over the place. And you, Mr. Liberal, are not talking about. Therefore, if you're going to point at the Proud Boys, you're a liar and a hypocrite. And that's where this conversation with you stops. I'm not going to try and defend the Proud Boys. I'm not going to try and distance myself from them. We're going to talk about you and your hypocrisy, because until we deal with that, the Proud Boys can go out of existence, and we've still got every bit the same problem we have. We still have the threatening at the school board meetings and everything.
Yeah.
And unless we deal with that, and the minute I mention in my book, I say the minute they engage in hypocrisy when attacking you, the minute they engage in hypocrisy becomes the issue.
Right.
And unless you stop right there and you deal with that hypocrisy, which means essentially dispensing with them because they're not on an honest basis, unless you do that, what you've done is you've now accepted these bogus premises. And from that point forward, you're playing this defensive game, which is designed to where, at best, if you do everything perfectly from that point forward, you can only break even. Well, you're not going to break even. You're going to lose.
yeah, I told the parents from Stagg, I really applaud them coming together. From different religions, races.
Let me ask you real quick, Stagg. What?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a
Stagg
high
is a high
school.
school. So it's a high school on the Southwest Side, and parents from different races, religions, even Democrats are coming together, right?
Now the organization, you mentioned the name of the organization that's having this meeting, and I'll be honest with you, from the name of the organization, I couldn't tell if this was sincere, concerned parents wanting to protect their kids, or if this was the LGBTQ whatever crowd who were saying, in order to protect our kids, my son has to be able to say he's a girl and go into your daughter's locker room, because this is the basis on which they will claim their phony moral high ground. And unless unless, again, at that point, unless we stop them dead and say, no, if you're advocating that, you're advocating attacking real innocent young girls, and I'm not going to work with you. I'm not going to find common ground with you.
Yeah, what they've done to us, and they're going to do it to these parents, right? If we stand up against oral sex images in our kids' books, right?
Yep.
Graphic, nasty sexual images.
Look
that
how
we hate
far it's
gay
gotten.
kids. We hate gay kids, right?
Yep,
Oh,
yep.
the suicide rate is high. Oh, the drug rates, the homelessness rates. It's all because they don't have an oral sex BJ picture in their library. That's a lie. That has nothing to do with it. They're trying to change the narrative.
Yeah. One of my rule number 4, I say never accept baseless leftist assertions of cause and effect, which are vehemently proclaimed as inarguable truths, but are only enabling propaganda. And that's a great example. You mentioned the suicide rates. Let's talk about the suicide rates and the broken lives of these innocent kids who have been sexualized, who've been dragged into this mire of porn, these kids who've been assaulted, girls in the locker rooms and everything. Let's talk about the suicide rates amongst them, and not the possible suicide rate if this gay kid doesn't get to look at porn in the classroom, which is a baseless assertion.
I'm glad you actually brought up that example, because Terry and I actually used this rule of yours on our show. We had gone to an event. There's a law in Illinois called the book ban bill, and they say it's a law that prevents us bigots from banning books. But
just the name of the bill is so textbook.
Yeah, and what it actually does is it violates our First Amendment rights to redress our grievances with our government, because it now gives the state of Illinois government and the libraries the ability to introduce whatever propaganda they want, and parents have no ability to get it out.
Yep.
Look
at what they're actually trying to do, and look at how they couch it in this virtue and holiness of. And
that's the point, though. I just wanted to finish that point of we used your actual rule number 4, because they tried to give that cause and effect through these statistics about these suicide statistics they got from the Trevor Project. Well, we went online and we found that was all bunk. That the Trevor Project created it. They had no backing of those statistics. It was all created from data that they got online through voluntary.
Sounds just like the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Right.
And so she was using that, and we went on our podcast. We're like, no, look, that's all BS. The one doesn't relate to the other. It doesn't prove whatsoever that kids are going to kill themselves unless they see porn in school. So
let's talk about their real agenda, their real goal versus their professed one. Their professed one is keeping these kids from committing suicide. Isn't that virtuous? Aren't they such nice people for doing this? Yeah. Their real goal is to actually pervert these children and create children who are totally morally debased, and you don't go from that to being a responsible leader of an intact family, unless something miraculous happens. And if you look at their actual agenda versus the virtue with which they the banner that they put over it. And this is everything they do. Again, every single thing they do. Leftists do not care about any cause they claim to champion.
Yeah. I think, we can kind of segue into the rhino conversation here, because
we need to.
I'm going to give you an example of how your
one
rules.
Second. Before we jump into rhino, because that's going to be a whole news. We have one little 60-second sponsor.
Oh, yeah.
So why don't we do that real quick? So, one of our sponsors, Chris, there you go. Give you a little break.
Yeah.
Thank you, Illinois Freedom Alliance. So, Chris, we'll keep going. We don't have to stop at an hour unless you have like a hot date or something.
No, I'm
So
coming up on my 30th anniversary, but she's still a hot date.
That's good. Oh, there you
But
go. Kudos.
yeah,
for you.
we definitely can talk about this. First of all, I'm going to tell you guys, this may sound a little mercenary, but I would be happy to send you guys a book if you could forward it to the Illinois Freedom Alliance, because I think they could definitely use it for their effort.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so to pick back up on how I wanted to segue into the rhino conversation. So Terry and I are committeemen in our local Republican organization, and we're trying to kind of force a grassroots movement. And Terry had mentioned earlier how in our county level we found out that some of the Republican leaders were donating to Democrats, including the radical Kim Foxx, who's marshaling through this cashless bail system. And so a lot of committeemen were upset. We tried to raise through the parliamentary rules. We tried to raise a censure effort. And, we've tried to speak out against our Senate Minority Leader who voted for a pro-union amendment to our Constitution and took money from the teachers union and things of this nature. And they started to, the Jack Novak, the organization chairman, is basically censoring us, and he's not allowing us to speak our minds. He's not allowing for the democratic process, and so Terry and I kind of went on the offensive. Terry posted a meme about the guy being Hitler, and
I saw that.
And I got into it. I yelled at him at our last committeeman meeting because I said he hadn't followed the parliamentary rules.
Remind me to buy you a steak dinner there for that, Paul.
And so what we're dealing with is a feckless Republican government. We have a 40-19 deficit in the Senate. We've got a 78-40 deficit in the House. Mm-hmm. We've lost the last two governorships, and we effectively have, and now not only that, but we have multiple laws that have been passed in Illinois that are fundamentally violations of the United States Constitution. So we're in communist territory. That's why we call our show Behind Enemy Lines. That being said, we kind of adopted your first rule, which was never apologize. And, people have kind of got on us like, you're going too far, you're doing this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, we're about as far in the hole as we can possibly be. And you want us to apologize and not put up our, and just put our fists down and say, hit me wherever you want. I was wondering what your thoughts are on this idea of, going on the offensive, because I saw, no matter what you think about Donald Trump, he never apologized. He kept his eye, and one of your other rules is stay on target. Mm-hmm. So if you could kind of describe to us, what fighting should look like in this political atmosphere, and how that your rules can apply to a successful political strategy.
Okay, well, let's start with the rule number one. It's rule number one for a reason, and I want to let me just read the whole thing, because it isn't just never apologize. It's never apologize unless an actual wrong has been committed, and then this is key. And then, if an apology is truly warranted, and that's something you determine, not your accuser. Right. If an apology is truly warranted, you remain very specific as to the issue that's actually being addressed. Okay. Donald Trump doesn't apologize, and can we sit around and go through Donald Trump's track record and say, there's actually this case here where he should have apologized. I'll give you one example where he did actually apologize, and that's when this locker room conversation from 20 years ago in private, where he makes a crude statement. He didn't say something he should do. He didn't say something he would do. He said something he could do. Right. Okay. And he wasn't talking about any of his behavior. He's talking about these sycophants and their willingness to allow any kind of abuse because they're sycophants. That's all he was saying. It was a crude conversation, but it was a personal conversation. And he says, I shouldn't have said it that way. Okay. Now, does he have to apologize for all women for threatening them? No, that's crap. That's something that a bunch of people on the left concocted in order to say it's much bigger than it really was. And by the way, these people, if you look at how they treat women, how do these people feel about Epstein's Island? How do they feel
Right.
about Bill Clinton?
Yeah.
You remember how
That's
he
a great
treated women?
point. That's a great point.
No problem with that. Why? Because they're hypocrites, they're leftists.
Or Hillary's
So,
emails, right? We compromise
Yeah.
our national security, but
Absolutely
my
right.
emails aren't important. Like you're a
Yeah,
you're
and she declares them
committed
unimportant.
treason. You committed treason. That's important.
Yeah. Now let me go back to what you were saying there about the Republicans, and this is really key. And again, I'm not just splitting hairs here on these things, but you mentioned the fact that they're feckless. Okay, I ended up, as I'm writing my book, I'm going, I need to add a chapter here, I need to add a chapter there, and I started putting things in, and one chapter that I realized, and I started, it's chapter 7. I started with the fact that this is actually the most important chapter in the entire book. And the title of the chapter is Rhinos, as the essential
Illinois.
Alinsky fifth column. Okay.
They'll eat you alive here.
What they are, the rhinos is they're leftists, and they get behind you in the trench. Okay.
Stab you in
I
the
mentioned the Trojan horse, and whether it was
Right.
mythology or whether it was an actual historical event, the point being that the lesson of it is that a handful of people got inside the gate and accomplished something that the entire Greek army and navy
Right.
couldn't do, trying to
Right.
sack Troy. Okay, and this is the way the rhinos operate. There are 3 kinds of rhinos. Now, you use the word feckless. There are some of those. Okay, and those are probably the least dangerous. But there's 2 other kinds that are actually much worse. The feckless ones, I would say, those are the moral cowards. Okay,
Right.
they know the right thing, but they don't really quite have the backbone to do it. Okay, but you have the other kind that are actually leftist lackeys. They are in there to do the work of the left, and they call themselves Republican. And
Right.
again, going back to Wyoming, Liz Cheney.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Liz Cheney comes to Wyoming. Now, she was raised there, and then she went back to D.C., and she's part of the swamp. She's part of the elitists, the Republican establishment. She buys a house in Jackson in, I believe it was 2014, to run against our, at that point, incumbent conservative Senator Mike Enzi. And I'm not kidding you. This hasn't gotten much press outside of Wyoming, but Dick Cheney, her father, is, he's well known. He was the vice president, so he's popular in Wyoming on that basis. And he actually promoted her as, I'm not kidding, go look it up, the Tea Party candidate. Okay. Now, this didn't get any traction, and she's running against Mike Enzi, who's actually a fairly reliable conservative. And so she didn't get any traction. So she dropped out of that race. She wormed her way into the Congress, and it's a long story how she did that. But her whole goal from the start,
So did he.
she wasn't trying to represent Wyoming. Wyoming's a low population state.
Right.
You can get elected cheaply there, especially if your name is Cheney. And
Yeah,
if you get elected, it's a springboard towards bigger things back in D.C.
I always thought that was interesting that he had been a politician out of Wyoming, because it was like, it was probably easy for a guy who had absolutely zero personality to get elected, in a state like that, because I imagine that he looked at the landscape as like, that's where I get elected, because he had he wasn't compelling.
I'll be honest with you, I don't know if he actually lived there at the time, and it was big fish in a small pond thing.
Yeah.
But here's the thing to understand, going back to the rhinos, you have people that it's like in Wyoming, you call yourself Republican. As I said, you stay away from the Second Amendment and a state income tax, and you can get elected. Then you go back to DC and you make your millions and you do your big thing back in DC. The goal of these people, and I'm talking about the Cheneys, I'm talking about the Paul Ryans, the Mitt Romneys, the goal of these people, and this whole crowd, by the way, that was opposing Jordan in the last couple of days, the goal is to maintain the DC status quo. Because we get in front of the cameras, and you, Mr. Democrat, and I'm the Republican, and we'll argue back and forth, and we'll go out and have a beer together, and we'll send out fundraising letters to our people, and we'll be heroes to our respective crowds, and we really don't care what happens.
Well, I wonder what your thoughts on this are. I've always said it. I think I've told Terry this before. I was like, the Uniparty. They're in Washington. They're on the same team. I feel like they made a backdoor deal where the Republicans were like, all right, well, we'll pump up the national security state so as to enslave them by, you know, putting stuff in like the Patriot Act and then claiming that, hey, we've got to protect America. And then the left is like, all right, yeah, and then we'll destroy the culture and make them, you know, dependent on handouts. And then that's how we'll both work together to enslave everybody. And you know, I'm being hyperbolic by saying they're making a backdoor deal, but I mean, effectively, that's what you see playing out in real time.
Well, you know, how far back it goes, I'm not quite sure.
Right.
Might have been going on with the Patriot Act. I personally am convinced that we were legitimately being attacked by Islamists on 9/11. I find that there's a lot of people don't believe that anymore.
Oh, I
and
wasn't
whereas I
saying
disagree
anything
with
like
them
that. I'm just-
vehemently,
Yeah, I believe.
I can't blame them for the cynicism. Okay. Now, having said that, I will tell you this: that once Trump got elected, 2017 comes around, and he's two things he's going to do. He's going to build the wall, and he's going to repeal Obamacare.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. During 2011, whenever Obamacare was fully enacted, you had, like, I forget how many dozen votes among the Republican Congress and Senate to repeal Obamacare. The minute Donald Trump gets in office, all of a sudden they're not going
Right.
to vote on it.
Right.
Okay. They're not going to take a risk. And again, some of them are feckless because some of them are afraid, well, you know, if we repeal Obamacare and some old lady dies because of lack of treatment, we're all going to get blamed for it. So no, I'm not going to repeal that. You have a lot of them that this is the deep state and we're all getting rich off of it. My medical buddies are great donor class people and all that. And so, no, they're not going to repeal Obamacare. It was a perfect marriage between, medical monarchy and bureaucracy. Okay, the wall was the other thing.
Right.
Your Democrats want cheap votes, and your Republicans want cheap labor. So both sides are going to bring,
That's
keep
a
the
good
wall
point,
open.
yeah.
And Trump is trying to. He's shocked, and if anything that he was mistaken, anything he did wrong was to underestimate the depth and the truly fetid nature of the swamp.
Well, so
And
that's why guys like Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, as you mentioned, or McCain all hated Trump, right? Because he came in and was like, "No, I'll actually do the things that you guys talk about, but you never do."
Exactly right.
Right.
So I have something that'll probably
No
make you
rhinos.
laugh. I have some establishment friends I've been working with. There's your rhino thing. And they it's kind of funny is that, like, when we attack rhinos that are truly rhinos, they don't like it. They don't want us to use it, right? And then I'm told, and in case my buddy's watching, he'll know
They
who he
hate
is.
us, Chris. They hate us.
And he says,
Oh, they hate us more than they hate the Democrats.
Yeah,
That's
he's-
something I learned in Wyoming.
He's like, there's no such thing as dinos. You know, why are we using the word rhinos? Well, dinosaurs are extinct. And so there are no dinos on the left, right? They all fall in. They listen. They do whatever they're supposed to do. And then if there is a dino, the unions or somebody will kill that dino. So there's no such thing as dinos because they don't exist.
Right.
We're stuck
Okay,
with
well,
rhinos.
I'm going to take a variation on that. It sounds like I'm just stumping from my book, but you remember that I say leftists don't believe in any cause they claim to champion, and it's all a matter of exploiting. Okay, here's the thing about the leftist agenda is founded on Marxism.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
Marxism was an ideology of total lies. Okay, well, the leftists, the Democrat Party, they're a party of liars. I mean, that is how you define Democrats. They're liars. Okay, they don't care about what they claim to care about. It's all about advancing their agenda. So how can you be unfaithful to lies?
Yep.
The only thing you could possibly do is tell the truth. And that, believe me, when a Democrat comes out, and every rare occasion that a Democrat comes out and tells the truth, the party goes after them. But those would be the ones that tell the truth. That actually puts them on the right. That would be the Democrats in name only, and they don't stay Democrats for long. The Republicans, on the other hand, it's the mask and the facade is how they exist. And so if they claim to be for family values, and then they support this garbage in the public schools that you've been describing, then it's like, yeah, there's a total dichotomy there. Both premises cannot possibly be true. And so it's a Republican in name only, because the real person stands for the Democrat agenda. The real person stands for the counterculture garbage that's going on in the schools.
So I'd love to get you, and I want to keep going back to this, but it really is, it's specific to, it's to your rules, our story. And, you know, we got some pushback internally about how we were approaching going after this rhino, this chairman Jack Novak of our local Republican organization. And Terry and I have been strident in that we're not going to apologize for calling him a dictator. We're not going to apologize for going after the Republican establishment, because they're not Republican. They
Absolutely
are
right.
Republican in name only. You're like, if you're donating to Kim Fox, who's one of the most radical
Soros funded.
Yeah, Soros funded
Yep.
district attorneys in the country, who's, you know, creating mass crime throughout all of Cook County. You know, we're going to call you out on that. And the idea that the establishment is like, you know, the Ronald Reagan rule, don't criticize Republicans, and that's what he told us, Chris.
Oh, absolutely. Let me ask you something.
But they'll criticize Trump, right?
Yeah,
And I was going to go right back to that.
Yeah.
Did this guy condemn Liz Cheney for criticizing Trump? Did he
they won't
condemn Mitt Romney?
anybody,
No.
Chris. They
So
won't
it's
condemn
okay for
anybody.
them to attack somebody on the right.
Right.
It's okay for the Republicans to do that. I mentioned a couple of terms in here that, and this again, I watched this happen in Wyoming. The minute you have a Republican who's pushing a liberal agenda and you say anything negative about it, they had two terms they loved throwing out there: is eating their own and a circular firing squad.
Yeah, circular firing
now,
squad.
do they say that about when all these rhinos attack somebody who's really conservative? Is anybody being criticized among these rhinos? You know, don't attack Terry and don't attack Paul because they're fellow Republicans. No, because you're conservatives. You're open season. But for you to resist this in any way is you upsetting party unity. Why? Because in their mind, the party is them.
Isn't that an indication that it's the establishment that determines who's electable? Because that's exactly what we're starting to run into. It's like, oh, okay. So
they'll love that term.
When
Let
we
me tell you
have
something.
a voice, you're going to tell us that we're not allowed to talk because we're criticizing Republicans.
That electable, non-electable thing is again one of those leftist games that the rhinos play to tell you who you can and can't run for office, because they want more rhinos in office. Now, here's the thing: in Illinois that you mentioned, you know, big blue state, we got the, you know, the population center of Chicago that totally throws the state to the blue. But what do the Republicans say? They say, well, we've got to be like that to get elected. Okay,
That's exactly what they say.
Which is it's worse than cowardice. If it was just cowardice, you could knock a little sense into them. What it is how do we promote ourselves within our own sphere, our party or whatever, without actually taking a stand?
Yeah.
Because it takes courage to take a stand. Here's the thing: look at going back a half century, your Republican presidential candidates who got the most black vote, who got the most Democrat vote, they were people, they weren't the George Bushes or the George Bush Juniors. They weren't that crowd, or the Bob Doles, the fence sitters. They were the Ronald Reagans. They're the Donald Trumps.
Right.
These people who actually stand for something. What's that?
Independent thinkers.
Independent things. They stand for something not cheaper than the Democrats, but higher than the Democrats. And this is the thing that needs to happen in the Republican Party. And I will tell you, going back to Wyoming, the group you need to watch is the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. Because this same battle you're talking about, you're saying, well, this is Illinois, it's a blue state. No, it's happening in Wyoming right now. The state speaker of the House, a guy named Albert Summers, is the biggest rhino in the world, and he's doing everything he can because the Freedom Caucus is fighting for individual rights. They're fighting for actual freedom and representation of the people, and the establishment in Wyoming doesn't like it. And for the exact same reasons, it's that we don't want that Freedom Caucus getting their hands on the spigot where we're getting all our money for all of our pork. And you can go down the list, and everything that's going on, it's the exact same things that you guys are dealing with. What you do, what you said, Paul, you're absolutely right. You stand your ground. You know, if you accuse this Republican Party chairman, if you accuse him of being a drug dealer and he's not a drug dealer, rule number one: if you actually got it wrong, legitimately wrong, where you said something about the guy that was inaccurate, and it's something substantive, It's not just you said he was born on a Tuesday, he's born on a Wednesday, but something substantive that you got wrong, you apologize for that. Does that change the fact that he's a rhino lackey of all the leftists? No, it doesn't. That you stick with, and there's no apologizing. The minute you apologize for the truth, what you've done is you just embraced the lie.
Bingo.
Yeah,
Sounds like we're going to stick our ground.
he tells us that we want to win the middle, right? We got to win the middle.
See, and that's another rhino ploy that they always pull: win the middle by trying to be like the opposition.
Yes. So what I tell them is you got to win the right. They don't even have people on our side voting for them because people, a lot of them don't want to vote because it's a waste of time. A lot of them don't want to vote because they don't represent us.
Jack Novak wouldn't know how to get a Republican vote if it bit him in the ass.
And the quality of our candidates are deteriorating because they don't feel they're going to be supported. They're not going to be representing us. We're having a hard time raising money because you're flushing money down the toilet. And these guys keep talking about the middle. Then we have our leader who's calling people anarchist because they wanted to censure our other leaders given to Democrats,
and then censors us because we want to speak out.
And then I'm called, I'm called a right wing extremist. I was at January 6th. I was there peacefully. I didn't hurt anybody. I went there to see Donald Trump, and I went there to protect people from being beat up by Antifa. I didn't know about the Capitol. I had nothing to do with that. So they're going around trying to discredit me, our own organization.
Absolutely right.
And I'm an Iraq War veteran. I served my country. I put my ass on the line, which is more than any one of them can say. And they're going to call me an anarchist. Well, you know what? I put my money where my mouth is. So, I'm out here trying to fight for my country.
Okay.
Don't be calling me an anarchist.
The guy that calls you an anarchist, what is he actually doing? And saying to drive back these leftist anarchists that are trying to destroy the country.
He refuses to talk about it. He doesn't even tell them about it.
Here's the thing.
Let me answer that question real quick for Chris in more detail. The one thing that I had worked very closely with this guy in this organization for about 9 months. I worked for a conservative. They named themselves a Republican consulting firm, and so I was a subcontractor for them to work with this organization. I kept telling them, you have to speak out against the stuff that's going on in the schools, the sexualization that they're trying to put on our kids, the fact that they're hiring like BLM activists at the library, paying them $150,000+ in consulting fees for them to tell the library that the north side of town is oppressing the south side of town because they're more economically better off. Things like this, and that they're racist and they need to introduce more of the sexualized material in the library, all this kind of stuff. I said, you got to speak out against this stuff. Put this stuff out in the community. If nothing else, you don't have to editorialize. Just put it out there so that people know what's going on. And you know what he said to me continually? He rebuked me and said that we don't want the Democrats to call us radicals.
Okay.
Coward.
In other
Jack
words,
Novak, you're a coward.
In other words, now that right there, at the very least, is total cowardice. The other thing is that in the process, he's also because you guys have got the guts to stand up against it. You guys have got the spine, and you're doing that. He's attacking you over that. So what is he doing with all these anarchists and stuff? The real anarchists, he's enabling them. Exactly. Okay, he's an anarchist enabler. The very thing that he's accusing you of, he's actually enabling with his cowardice and with his anti-Christian, anti-conservative agenda. And that's the way he needs to be portrayed. And you're talking about, I understand the frustration I can hear with you guys. Believe me, 30 years of fighting the rhinos in Wyoming, I've been there. But what you've got to do is it's like this big avalanche that's been coming down a hill for a long time. You don't just put up your hand and have it stop. It's not going to work that way. But you start by slowing it down, stopping it, and then you start pushing it back. And this is what you guys are doing. And I guarantee you, the upset from these people is extremely it's enormous evidence that you guys are effective. Okay. Now, the other thing you got to do is you got to keep in your mind that your success is not measured by their approval of you. Okay. Your success is measured by how you connect with the voters out there, with the people out there. And frankly, if you can do what Matt Gaetz did and simply get Kevin McCarthy thrown out as speaker, That's a step in the right direction. That never happened before.
What do you know about that, Terry?
You know, so some
do you
of the
know about
people
that?
are here.
That's what we said, Chris.
People are coming to our side, right? And there's
Right.
some that it's like staying in a bad marriage. It's easier to stay in the bad marriage. It's hard to get a divorce, right? So we get people like they agree with us, but what are we going to do?
It's a great analogy, Terry.
Who's going to replace Jack? I'm like, well, you know, if you're going to go through a divorce for many reasons, right? It's not healthy. You're not getting along, whatever, right? You don't say, hey, I'm not going to get divorced until I find another wife first, right? So they have to have the courage to stand up. It's a lot easier.
Well, and the enemy, the leftist enemy, they deal in fear. So what are they going to do? They're going to make you afraid to stand. That's what that whole unelectable thing is all about. You can't run for office. You conservatives can't run for office. We're going to declare you as unelectable, and then we're going to undermine you and backstab you every way to make sure that you don't get elected. But the point is that if you go in there, and again, I'm going back to the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, you go in there and you say, you know what, I'm going to take this stand. And because why? It's the right thing to do. I'm going to take this stand. You're going to find you get a lot more people elected that way than you do by trying to tap dance the way these guys are doing. And you do start seeing the tide change.
Chris, and this is great stuff because it's all, you know, the funny thing is that I think Terry and I decided to fight back, and a lot of what your rules are, we've been instituting, and just by by that fighter's mentality, particularly Terry's been in this fight for a few years, and he went outside the establishment and started engaging the media. He got put on a fly list by the government. He had, and Matt Gaetz in particular, and Troy Niels and some politicians got him off of that by writing a letter to the Department of Justice, Merrick Garland, and the FBI. So
see, Matt Gaetz is another one you need to send one of my books to. We'll talk about that later.
Absolutely, but you know, that fighter's mentality. I noticed these rules, and I'm like, okay, we're instituting a lot of those. And this is probably going to have to be like one of our last questions because I know we're running pretty late here. But I wanted to the one rule. I think it's 10. Choose winning battles. You know, I think that's what we're doing with this fight that we're currently engaged in, because we are a grassroots movement, and you have to start at the bottom level, and you got to get a winnable win before you start moving up and you know, going after bigger fish. So could you just kind of touch on that last rule, 10, choosing winning battles, and kind of elaborate on what you mean by that?
Well, yeah, and let's just you know, let's pick some issue. You know, Social Security, taxation levels. You know, for seniors above a certain income. Okay, and you're going to go into the South Side of Chicago and start talking about that as Republicans. This is what we believe needs to be done, and they're going to just either ignore you or laugh in your face.
Right,
okay.
right.
There are issues that connect with people. There are issues that don't. I guarantee you that even in your very deep blue districts, you go to the average citizen there and say, do you want a boy in the locker room with your daughter?
Right.
Do you want a drag queen teacher showing your 9-year-old son these pornographic pictures I won't even describe because he wants to recruit him? Do you want that? You're going to connect with these people.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's got to be a smart strategy. The first 9 rules are all primarily about the snares that they set for you to hamstring you from fighting an effective battle. Okay, but now you get to this point. Well, 9, stay on target. You get to this point and you say, okay, now what do we do? Well, you know, let's go into Berkeley, California, and try and convince them that the Earth isn't actually going to incinerate itself next year. Okay, and that you're not going to get anywhere.
Right.
Okay, so what you do is you go to rural California, and I can tell you, if you guys have been just paying attention to the Temecula, the Chino Hills School District, you really ought to, because they're fighting with Governor Gavin Newsom over the same exact thing.
My buddy lives outside
are.
of Temecula. I heard a little bit about that. Yeah.
No, okay. So, but they're taking, and the governor of the state is he's got to destroy these people. And why? Because them standing and them prevailing is a mortal threat to him.
Right.
Okay. You guys are the same way, where if you guys are able to stand with your ideals that you're promoting, then you're going to upset the whole apple cart. So yeah, you go for it on that basis. That's how you connect with people.
So in closing here, right? You know a little bit about what we're fighting and challenges in Illinois. Can you give us any recommendations in I guess in a broad way, what should Republicans in Illinois? What are some of the things there's so much to follow, right? What would you recommend to try to turn the tide? We're having a hard time. People are not motivated. They're knocking on doors. It's a waste of time. What are some of the things
demoralized? They've been demoralized.
Yeah, absolutely
suggest?
demoralized. And that this party chairman that you're describing and their attitude is the most demoralizing thing. Nothing takes the wind out of people's sails more than somebody in that situation who won't actually do it. The whole thing that Paul Ryan did to not build the fence was to take the wind out of Trump's sails.
Right.
That's how they operate. Here's the thing. The number one issue I would say right now where you can connect with people is what's going on in the schools, because it is not something, even a lot of people that would consider themselves left-leaning, do they want their kid actually being recruited into that sewer? No, they don't. The thing that you've got to do is you've got to ignore these so-called Republican leaders. They're only Republican leaders because they worm their way into this office.
Right.
You guys are the Republican leaders because
That's
here's
right.
what Republicans stand for, and here's what we're fighting for.
I mean, Chris, they will not speak, like, they won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. One of the things that they did after we were coming, like, we're called, radicals when we go to these meetings because there's only a minority of us, and our party will not
They won't even
back us
show
up.
up.
They won't show up. They won't even talk about it.
Right.
Right. So the school board moved the meeting into this tiny little room. They won't even have they got 2 high schools with 2 huge auditoriums. They move it in this tiny little room. And where's our Republican establishment speaking out against this? Trying to give a voice back to the people? Nowhere to be found.
I would look into the and again, I use the term the real churches. You guys need to watch a guy on YouTube. His name is Jack Hibbs. He's out of Chino Hills, California. He's a pastor, and he explains all of these things in total continuity from biblical truth to what's going on in the modern culture. And I would go to the local churches and the real ones, again, I say, that stand for the right things. And I'd say, hey, you people, you need to put your money where your faith is,
Right.
and help us out on these issues. And you'll find there's a lot more people that if they actually think that they can rally with a leader who's going to take this on and actually do something about it, they'll actually do it. Do they want to just get mad and then have their Republican leadership roll over again? No, I don't even want to do that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So this has been great. I would love to have you back on. There's so much we could talk
Great
about.
conversation.
Anytime you want, I'd happily
I
be
love
back
this,
on.
and I still want to get you up to Chicago, somewhere out in the western suburbs. We talked about it where you're safe, because we're the epicenter. And I'm telling my GOP buddies, we got to get Christopher up here, man, because he'll
It'll
pump
be
us
awesome
up
to
and
have you in the
excite us.
studio.
Well, and I appreciate that. And again, I sound a little mercenary here, but I'm genuine about this. The people who want to fight this battle to win, one of the first things you can do is get them to start reading the book, because unfortunately we go into the battle and we fight it the way it's been fought in the past. Well, what happened in the past? We always lost.
Oh, it's
I
great.
got your
playbook.
cards.
It's
I'm here.
great
I got a
playbook.
bunch of his cards. We got to hand out.
Yeah, for sure.
So
That's great.
I'm gonna lick one of them. Put them right on the forehead of Jack.
Yeah. Our producer, Jason, thank you very much. As always, he mentioned something very key here. Chris, can you please tell everybody where they can find your book, where they can buy your book, where they can find you if you're on social media, if you have a website, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Floor is yours.
Okay. Unfortunately, my book is published through Amazon. I tried approaching Mike Lindell, and he hasn't gotten back to me on it yet. I'd like to get an alternative publisher, Dan Bongino, maybe. But at this point, it's just on Amazon. So you go to Amazon, you look up my name, Chris Adamo, or you look up Rules for Defeating Radicals. I'm on Twitter and Truth Social. It's at CG Adamo, at CGADAMO. And I'd love to talk to fellow conservatives, and we can hash ideas out. If you're a liberal that's going to throw your little litany of accusations at me, I'm going to block you.
Right?
Yeah.
I think we had a few hours talking here, which is kind of funny.
Not surprised.
But that's okay. I kind of enjoy it. So,
Well,
thank you very much.
do we want to close with the?
Yeah, we're gonna. We're gonna. You want to do a couple shout outs there, and then our guest next week actually is going to be, and we're going to show a little video clip here, and you could stay on there if you'd like, Chris. You
should stay on, Chris, so we could chat with you after the show.
Police State is coming out next week, and one of my good buddies, Ryan. If you're watching, Ryan, love you. So
Thank
Ryan's
you
in
so
the
much
Ryan's
for
in the
coming
show.
on.
He's going to be a guest. He's going to be one of our guests, and he was the Project Veritas whistleblower on Facebook. Yeah, and so behind the mask of Facebook, that's Ryan's book, and I don't know if you could show his book. And so he was in the movie, and I think this will be his first interview since the movie comes out next week. So I'm really excited. He's going to be down at Mar-a-Lago in a couple weeks with Bargino and Dinesh D'Souza. Really nice young man. It took a lot of courage for him to do that. So we're excited to have him.
Oh man, for sure. I mean, like to be able to talk about the censorship thing and to find out.
Give him a card.
You know, yeah, for sure.
I will.
That's going to be huge.
Definitely. And
do you want to run that?
Yeah. Can you show?
Let's run that clip real quick, and then I'll talk about the couple things. And
so this is coming out next week in theaters.
We honor you, Father, for all that you do.
Chief Division Counsel and DOJ have approved a no-knock breach. We want the subject to be on display, doing the walk of shame, full visual impact. Any questions?
Are we becoming a police state?
The government told American citizens they couldn't go to church on Sunday.
For the first time in my life, I'm saying to myself, am I going to get a knock at the door?
FBI warrant, come to the door now! Our focus is shifting. Our main priority as a bureau is going to be domestic terrorism.
Really paints anybody who's right of center.
If you're a pro-life, pro-family Catholic, they define you as radical.
These are anti-government.
We have freedom of religion and freedom of speech.
Violent extremists, and they must be dealt with. We can do anything we want.
So, are we on? Yeah, I can't wait to see that.
yeah, it looks.
And like it kind of hits home with me personally, being labeled a domestic terrorist, and then having 5 agents meet me at the plane and undercover marshals, and even put my family through that. Chris, when we went out to Charlie Kirk's event, they took my whole family and my children and their 2 friends on the side, and
A father for speaking out for his own kids.
And then on the way home, they actually made my family go through security twice, which is just absurd. And if it wasn't for Matt Gaetz and Troy Niels, I would still be considered a domestic terrorist.
But they're letting millions of military-age men just cross the border, and never, it's unbelievable.
So 2 last quick things.
Yeah, so we got a couple of fundraisers, events. We got a fundraiser and an event, one that's Terry's doing. So Samantha Gasca and the American Lawmen are presenting a Haunted Hallow fundraiser on Friday, October 20th at 3357 South State Street in Lockport, Illinois, from 6 to 10 p.m. It's Halloween theme, music, and decor.
Dress as rhinos.
Adult and child costume contest, trick or treat, adult and children, Halloween themed dessert tray, all this good stuff. So tickets are $15 for a wristband. Drinks are $3 or less.
Who's her campaign manager, by the way?
Is that Val Ojeda?
Yeah, hey Val, shout out to you, big
Val
buddy, my
Ojeda
big
on that
buddy.
one. So again, that's Friday, October 20th at 3357 South State Street in Lockport, Illinois. The Haunted Hell fundraiser. That's for District 19 grassroots Republicans. All right, the LaSalle County Moms for America are hosting Terry on Tuesday, October 24th at 6 p.m. at Jamie's Outpost in Utica, Illinois. So Terry is, again, the president for parents involved in education. He's obviously a parents' rights activist. He's going to be giving a presentation. He's going to be talking about some of the stuff that he's gone through, some of the stuff he's fighting.
Chris's slides are in there. I got your slides.
Chris has some slides in there. So again, shout out to Chris Adamo, Rules for Defeating Radicals.
Thanks.
And he's going to be talking about, everything that he's gone through and what's going on in the schools. Again, that's being run by the LaSalle County Moms for America on October 24th, Tuesday at 6 p.m. at Jamie's Outpost in Utica, Illinois. So come out and meet Terry. I'll be there, and Terry's gonna continue the fight. So
yeah, thank you. Thanks again, Chris. I really appreciate your time. It was very
Appreciate it.
helpful. I hope everyone else enjoyed the coaching and the advice that you provided us. And thanks for your book. Thanks for what you're doing.
Thank
And-
you.
And stick on the line, Chris, if you will, so
Sure.
we can just chat with you afterwards. Again, thanks to Chris. Thanks to Jason, our wonderful producer, for a great show. Thank you, Terry. And we're going to continue to fight you rhinos.
Thank you.
Every time we pull up, you see stars, you see stripes, you see flags on the cars and the trucks and the bikes. Every time we pull up, we go hard, we outside, we got flags on our arms that are tatted there for life. Every time we pull up, we don't care if you're mad, we cherish this land, the haters can't get buried in rags. They set fire to old glory, turning fabric to ash. But every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is American flag.